I just wanted to preface this to say I know the title may be, well, I hope it's not a controversial title. Um, but yeah, the whole talk is not going to be just kind of digging into welfareism as such. I'm going to try and provide a bit of evidence as to why welfareism isn't the route that we want to be going down. And I'm hoping that most people in here do agree. Seems it's an animal rights conference, and maybe the reason why you came here. But if anyone doesn't really agree with kind of what I'm talking about, it'll be really great to have some questions at the end about it, because it's a conversation that we need to have, really. So yeah, it's going to be why we need to campaign for rights and not welfare. So just a quick introduction about myself for those who don't know who I am. My name's Ayrton. I'm from Animal Justice Project. I'm the campaigns manager. I've been with the organisation now for around 6 years. When I first, well, I'll go into Animal Justice Project in a minute. But I've been campaigning for animal liberation now for around 10 years. Started off as a grassroots activist in Nottingham with Nottingham Animal Rights. So they're like a really, really great grassroots group who have been around for around 30 years and who are linked to Veggies Catering Campaign, which you've probably seen at like every activism event around the country. My background is in zoology, so I got a zoology degree. My initial aim was to go into conservation, but what I realised with that is that by saving one species, you have to basically kill so many other species, and my ethics just couldn't deal with that. Ended up doing activism whilst I was at uni, and then I was like, this is like a perfect fit for me. I can try and save as many animals as possible, save individual animals as well, not just entire species. I'm an animal sanctuary trustee as well. So in North Derbyshire, there's a really great sanctuary called Charlie's Place. So yeah, I'm on the trustee board for that. The reason why I'm a trustee is because the entire reason why they became a sanctuary is because of me. I kind of pushed them into it. I offered them, well, asked them to take about 20 chickens one day, and they didn't really have the resources. So I was like, oh, become a sanctuary and we can fundraise. And then that was about 5 years ago. And now they have an entire sanctuary, so I'm very grateful to them. And then something which I guess most people don't really know, like if you do know me personally, is that I actually used to work on farms, and I probably don't look much like a farmer. But from the age of 15 up until 21, I did work on farms. I've worked on beef farms, I've worked on open farms with the public, and I've worked on sheep farms as well. The positive of that, obviously, there's a lot of negatives, but the positive is that it's given me a lot of insider information, especially within industries that people don't really know so much about, like the sheep industry. Because it was a really big sheep farm that I worked on. We used to lamb like 2,000 sheep a year. Just a bit about Animal Justice Project as well. Okay, just a bit about Animal Justice Project. So it was founded in 2014. So 10-year anniversary this December. We originally focused on animal experimentation. I think that's also how a lot of people got to know Animal Justice Project as a big campaign group against vivisection. I joined in 2018. I started the first animal farming campaign with Animal Justice Project, and since then I've worked on putting out every single animal farming campaign that we've ever done, including all of our investigation work as well. We're a team of about 9 people, so compared to other NGOs, we are quite small. But we often get told that people think we're a lot bigger than we are, just because of the output that we have. We do focus on a lot of UK firsts, so I'll go into that in a second with our investigation work. These are the 5 areas that we campaign under. So investigations, pressure campaigning, initiatives, event organisation and public engagement. That's all pretty straightforward. One of the big things that we do at Animal Justice Project is we try and get as much media as possible. So the 2 articles on the right-hand side, that was only about 2 weeks ago. And that was with one of our undercover investigations into cage-free egg farming. We've managed to reach every national paper, like in print, online. And I'd say probably over the last 6 years, we've like had hundreds of articles. They're all on our website as well from all of our previous investigations if you wanted to look. The other area that I'm really proud of with Animal Justice Project, especially because yeah, as I'm the campaigns manager, I've like organised these events as well. I don't know whether anybody knows about our Beef Expo event that we did a couple of years ago. There was a huge opening of a new livestock market in Darlington up north. And the beef industry usually have an annual event. And because of COVID, they weren't able to do it for a few years. So what we did, we turned up, we got on the roof and basically disrupted the entire event. And it was a grand opening of the livestock market and the first beef industry event in multiple years. And we made every national paper for that. And visually, it looked great. I'll show you a photo in a minute. A few months later that same year, we went to London, we climbed the Home Office. So that's the home of DEFRA. And the reason we did that was because that was during one of the really bad times of bird flu. So we were talking about how bird flu is going to be our next pandemic, because it was just after COVID as well. And then last year we went back to London, we did a huge projection on the Houses of Parliament, all about live exports. So this was the Beef Expo event. Top left, we put this huge banner along the front of the building. Because if you see there's like a bit of green underneath, that was like an amazing new sign that this livestock market had put onto the building. And their plan was to have photos with all of the organisations turning up that day for the industry event just below their logo. So we were like, no, we're going to just cover that and just wreck their entire day. Which we really did. It was fantastic. And bottom left, we had like huge roof banners. We had drones going over. We had a public demo alongside. And then bottom right, that's us getting onto the roof at like 4 a.m. in the morning. And because obviously they didn't know we were going to go, there was like only one security guard there. And the security guard saw about 20 masked up people running through the car park at 4 a.m. carrying like ladders and all sorts. And he just looked at us, turned around and went and sat in his car. So, and it's like, yeah, it's one of like my best ever things we've ever done in Animal Justice Project. And I think the entire team agrees it was just phenomenal, if I do say so myself. This was when we climbed DEFRA, and we had 2 professional climbing activists who joined us. Obviously, when we do NVDA as well, it does result in people getting arrested. So our climbers were arrested on this one. Unfortunately, I was also arrested on this one just because, well, they closed the road and all of the press turned up. And I was the one talking to the press, giving like TV interviews. So I think it was pretty obvious that I was the organizer. So they got me on, put me through like conspiracy charges and all of this stuff, and banned me from Westminster. But later on that year, we went back to Westminster and did a projection on the Houses of Parliament when I wasn't supposed to be there. But you got to do what you've got to do for the animals. Another great niche for Animal Justice Project is our investigations. If you went to Claire's talk yesterday about the power of undercover investigations, you'll know a lot more in depth about that. But we've released 18 undercover investigations in less than 5 years. Claire worked out that that's over 1/4 of all investigations in the UK across all NGOs, which I think is, quite impressive. We do a lot of UK first as well. So on the left-hand side, that's kid goats on a goat dairy. We filmed the killing of them at a day old, which had never been filmed in the UK. Male calf slaughter in abattoirs, calf dealers, depopulation of hens, and a big focus on the duck industry. And all of these areas in the last few years have never been filmed in the UK before. So we're kind of shining a light on that area for the first time. And with our investigations and our campaigning, we do have a focus on higher welfare. We typically don't go for those factory farm style or intensive farms. We have done a few times, but typically we go for RSPCA assured, organic, those kind of smaller businesses, family-led businesses, kind of hitting all of that propaganda that people might hit back at you with. And RSPCA assured, they've always been one of our biggest focuses, especially in the last few years. These are 5 of our undercover investigations that were all RSPCA assured. You can find all of our undercover investigations on our website as well. I'm not going to go into any detail of that. So now onto the talk. I'm talking quite fast, by the way, because I know how much content I've got. I've tried to reduce it down, but yeah, just to begin this section of the talk, the reason why, like both personally and the Animal Justice Project, we are abolitionists is these are just a few of the reasons I had off the top of my head. So welfareism promotes exploitation. Welfareism is all about promoting, better conditions for animals, or kill this breed and not this breed. That's promoting exploitation, condoning killing, takes away bodily autonomy, and violates the rights of animals. That's something that we talk about a lot with Animal Justice Project. You will have seen at the Beef Expo stunt, it was all about animal farming violating the rights of animals, because there's some parallels to be had there in terms of human rights being violated. That's how we talk about it with human rights. So we really want to bring that messaging over to animal rights as well, because nobody else really frames it in that way. It also has the whole ownership and property idea. It's aiding the oppression. And then something I'm going to go into later, there's some new scientific research as well, that welfareism opposes veganism and will hinder it in the long term. So the reason, the way I'm going to kind of show you why we need to promote rights and not welfare is through 3 different case studies. So these are all areas that we've worked on ourselves, and these are also areas that other NGOs are actively campaigning for. I know that other NGOs, they're doing fantastic work. I'm not here to kind of put any other group down. We all do have our place. But because these are being talked about so much at the moment, and we campaign about them ourselves, that's the reason why I chose them. So CCTV in slaughterhouses. I don't know whether everybody knows, but it's mandatory in England and Scotland. It has been for around 6, I think this is the 6th year. It's now mandatory in England. 6th or 7th year. I think there's currently a big campaign to get it mandatory in Wales as well. And these images, by the way, these are from our own slaughterhouse investigations. So top left, we've got male dairy calves that are being killed. Top right, that was a self-proclaimed gold star slaughterhouse. So that's where they raise the animals on the site, they slaughter the animals on the site, and they sell them in the farm shop. So basically, you can't get any high welfare. Bottom left is Gressingham Duck Slaughterhouse, and then bottom right is Hewitt Slaughterhouse, which we had prosecuted, and they had fines in excess of around £26,000. So these are our undercover investigations that we're doing. I've already just mentioned those, but just a note about alongside CCTV and slaughterhouses, people are using that to say that it's the welfare inside is much higher than it used to be. I'll show you in a moment that it isn't. And this is also alongside FSA inspections. So they're inspections by the Food Standards Agency. Typically, they're around every 15 months. Unless the slaughterhouse is maybe labelled as critical or needs to do changes, and it will be more often. And then official veterinarians, so they're slaughterhouse vets that are appointed by the FSA. So both the inspections and the OVs are there to promote high welfare as well. Well, to create a smokescreen of high welfare. It doesn't actually come out in reality. So just to talk about one of our investigations to show why CCTV hasn't been effective in improving animal welfare and it hasn't been effective in bringing about prosecutions is G&G beat Hewitt Slaughterhouse. So bottom left, the person in the yellow high-vis, that's the FSA appointed vet. What you can see here is the person in the blue is the manager of the slaughterhouse. He's using an electric goad, so that gives an electric shock to the cows. He's shocking the back of the cow, and it's an animal that cannot move forward because there's another animal in front of them. That's against guidelines straight away. That's against the law. And I don't know if you can quite tell on the photo, but the vet is actually laughing about this. And she aided the entire process. She didn't step in once during our entire filming. And obviously the manager is another person in place to make sure that the welfare is there. Bottom right, we've got tiny piglets that are being killed. They're only around 6 weeks old that were being killed in the slaughterhouse. The calves in the top left, we went through their passport details inside the slaughterhouse, and the youngest one was only 9 days old. The reason that male calves are ending up in slaughterhouses now is, again, because of another welfare push. Dairy companies and Red Tractor were being pressured to not allow the killing of healthy calves on farms at a day old. So male bull calves, they were typically killed at a day old, just shot in the head. But as a result of that, where are the calves going to go? Because they still don't want them. They sell them to dealers, put them through markets, so it's even more stressful. And by the time they reach 9 weeks old, anyway, they end up in a slaughterhouse. So you tell me if that's a better welfare improvement, or whether the lives of those calves is even worse over 9 days than it would have been in 1 day. Not condoning the shooting of 1 day old calves, but to me, their life is far worse because of this so-called welfare improvement. So just a summary of this investigation, everything that we filmed was in clear view of the slaughterhouse's own CCTV. That means that the CCTV being in place didn't prevent any of this from happening. The OV, which is the official veterinarian, as I mentioned, she aided in the abuse. With the FSA audits, we looked back at the audits. This slaughterhouse, which was honestly terrible, I probably wouldn't recommend watching the footage because it was so bad. They were listed as generally satisfactory for 6 years before we did our undercover investigation. We then notified the FSA before we launched in the media. And what they did, so they quickly ran to the slaughterhouse, did an audit, and put them onto critical. That's the lowest ever one. And that means that they're going to get extra audits, and they have to put extra measures in place. And the reason that the FSA did that is because they knew it was going into national media, and they wanted them to be on critical before it made it into the media. So that's what was in the news story. So the FSA, which is obviously the government, are very clever about this. But if what we found during just 8 days of filming was so bad, how on earth would they get in generally satisfactory? Well, one of the reasons is all of the slaughterhouse audits that happen across the UK are announced. So the slaughterhouse know that they're about to be audited. So they're going to act good. They're going to clean the day before. It just doesn't work. It's yet again just another part of this whole smokescreen. I'm not going to go into too much of the details, but the bottom section is just some of the things that we found. So their equipment kept failing. That was the bolt gun, and it was the electrocution for the calves and the sheep. Kept breaking. They weren't stunning them for long enough. This is compared to slaughter legislation, by the way, not what we believe. They weren't stunning them for long enough. Too long stun to stick time, so that means after they've been stunned before they have their throat cut. They were leaving them for too long, which meant that the animals, by the time they were hung up, they were becoming fully conscious and then having their throats cut whilst they were conscious. And then too short dressing time basically means after they had their throat cut, before they start cutting off cutting ankles off and things like that, getting them ready to be butchered. Again, they were leaving them. They weren't leaving them a long enough time for the blood to drain out. So that means that these animals who were being hung up because they weren't stunned for long enough, were conscious, had their throat cut. Oof, bless you. They then weren't left long enough before being cut apart, which meant that they were still conscious. So every single part that we found was just absolutely disgraceful, honestly. And just a little note again about the FSA prosecutions. In 2023, the FSA made a huge announcement because it was so great that they did 3 prosecutions of these slaughterhouses. What we know is that of all of the slaughterhouse and farm complaints, only around 3% end up in prosecutions. And the top one, the first prosecution, was nothing to do with CCTV in the slaughterhouse. It was because one worker didn't have a license to touch animals. That was it. How bad the situations are in the slaughterhouses, that's what the FSA decided to focus on, was a license because it's paperwork. The second one at Lean Cell, they got prosecuted for animal suffering, but the only reason was because a sheep escaped from the slaughterhouse. They spoke to the slaughterhouse, realised that the story didn't quite add up, so they had a quick look at their CCTV. So it wasn't as a result of the CCTV, because of the vet looking through it, it was because of an escaped sheep. And thirdly, the prosecution at Hewitt Slaughterhouse was because of our undercover investigation. So it wasn't because of CCTV, it was because of our report and them looking at the CCTV inside the abattoir. So second case study. Am I doing okay for time? Hopefully. Second case study is the Better Chicken Commitment. I don't know how many people know about this, but there's a lot of groups campaigning for this at the moment. All of the photos here are from our first ever investigation. This was an RSPCA assured meat chicken farm, for a horrible term. The standards at an RSPCA assured farm like this are higher than what the Better Chicken Commitment are asking for. We've not yet done an investigation on a Better Chicken Commitment farm, but we can use this investigation to show that a farm with higher welfare standards is still terrible. So for those that don't know, the Better Chicken Commitment is basically a new set of welfare guidelines for the chicken industry, which are called high welfare, which, yeah, if you read the guidelines, you'll see that it's not really high welfare. The main point here is that they want to use a different breed of broiler chicken. So instead of these really fast-growing chickens, they want to use a slower-growing chicken, but they are still incredibly fast-growing chickens. They're just called slower-growing chickens because they grow ever so slightly slower. And I just wanted to point out, because on the Better Chicken Commitment website, which I was looking at, this quote stuck out to me. So it's, today we're excited to announce that we've signed up to the Better Chicken Commitment. Chicken is our business and we have a responsibility to support change. And that's from KFC. So if we're supporting the Better Chicken Commitment, these are the kind of allies that we have alongside us. And just to bring out 3 points of the Better Chicken Commitment here, you can read the commitment online. It's very short. It's only 1 page long. But here's three of the improvements that they want to see on these broiler farms. So the first one, that there's 2 meters of perch spacing. So that's the length of this table here, per 1,000 birds. So you probably can't fit 1,000 birds on that table, right? So how much use that's going to be, I don't know. But also 2 pecking substrates. I'm going to show you a photo in a minute as well to show you what that means. The second one says thinning is discouraged, and if practiced, must be limited to 1 thin per flock. So what that means is they'll go inside the broiler sheds, they'll pick out all of the biggest birds, maybe 50% of them. Typically, it's all of the male broilers because they fatten both male and females. The cockerels tend to grow faster. So they'll take all of them out to give the smaller ones maybe an extra week to get even fatter, to make more profit. It's incredibly, incredibly distressing for these birds. And as you can see from the wording, it's only discouraged. So it means they can still do it. If you discourage something, you're condoning it. And finally, it's adopt controlled atmospheric stunning using inert gas or multi-phase systems, or effective electrical stunning without live inversion. So what that means is they don't really want you to live shackle the chickens, which is really bad for them. You know, broilers' legs are incredibly painful. They certainly shouldn't be hung upside down, you know, when they're 4 kilos and they're only 6 weeks old or 5 weeks old even. But what they want you to do instead is to gas the birds. If anyone's looked at pig gassing, it's incredibly distressing. It's exactly the same for chickens. It's absolutely awful. It can take up to 2 minutes for the chicken to be rendered unconscious. Whereas, you know, if they have their throat cut, it's a few seconds. Not condoning it, but to me, gassing is certainly not a welfare improvement yet again. It's incredibly aversive, which means it's very, very painful for the animals who are being gassed to death. And this image here, I can't really see so much because of the title, but here there's like a triangular structure That's the 2 metre to perch spacing that those 1,000 birds have been given. So if you're supporting the better chicken commitment, this is what you're asking for. You're saying, hey, don't care about these. They're slower growing, but give them this. And also this here is the substrate bale. So there's one there, and there's one behind my text up here. So that's 2 substrate bales per 1,000 birds for enrichment. But something, well, you can't quite see on the photo, but they're still wrapped in plastic. So this one has a chicken sat on top. How they got there, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's it. That's a farm with higher standards than the better chicken commitment. So if we're pushing for better chicken commitment to improve the welfare on farms, this is really what we're asking for. If you parallel that to a regular intensive broiler farm, is pretty much exactly the same. The biggest difference is that they're a different breed of chicken who grow ever so slightly slower. But if you look on our investigation on our website, I've not put any footage in here because it's too distressing and we know what it looks like. We found exactly the same findings as you do on an intensive broiler farm. Like there was literally no difference. Like in this shed, for example, we filmed them chucking the 1-day-old chicks in here, and within the first 7 days, 500 of them were dead. And they're slow-growing breeds. I hope I'm not coming across as really negative here, but yeah, I guess that's the whole point, to show that these welfare improvements are really not helping animals. I'm going to be finishing on a bit of science, by the way, so it's a bit more positive. If you follow Animal Justice Project, you'll see that in the last 6 months we've campaigned heavily about eggs. We started off with an undercover investigation inside an enriched caged farm. So that's where they banned the battery cages and put in the enriched colony cages. We then looked at the depopulation of hens. So that's when they take out all of the hens for slaughter. And then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we released free range egg undercover investigation. All 3 of the farms on the investigation were RSPCA assured. Which is the highest welfare standards in the UK yet again. And then if you've not heard of it, there's a huge commitment. So similar to the better chicken commitment, which is for your meat chickens, there's the cage-free egg commitment for your laying hens. It's called the 2025 cage-free egg commitment because they're pushing for supermarkets and huge food retailers to not sell any eggs from caged birds by 2025. And all of the photos here were from the investigation we released 2 or 3 weeks ago. You can see dead hens, more dead hens, featherless hens. The hen on the bottom left who was being attacked had a bloody swollen face. This was common across every single site that we went to. This was not a bad farm. This was the standard. If you follow us as well, you'll see that there was a video that I think went out on Tuesday of me inside that farm, where they had emptied those older birds out and there was now younger birds inside because we returned to the farm, and there were still dead birds everywhere and the exact same issues, even on the younger birds. So the 2025 cage-free commitment, as I said already, is for major supermarkets and food companies. Some of them are already signed up. Some of them already only sell cage-free eggs. So that's places like Waitrose, M&S, Co-op, your typically, high welfare supermarkets. The idea is to stop selling caged hens. That should be caged eggs. Oh, eggs from caged hens, sorry. The issue here is that it's a voluntary commitment. It's nothing to do with legislation. Nobody's holding them accountable to this either. So every supermarket so far has said, yes, we're going to sign up to this commitment, but who's going to be checking that they've signed up to the commitment? What's going to happen if they don't sign up when they said that they were going to? Is it going to be bad for their reputation? Probably not, because they've already got the good press that they were going to sign up to the commitment. 2 of the points that you find on cage-free farms, they should have access to the outdoors during daylight hours. This isn't the case all of the time. For that farm that I showed you, we had a drone go up. Well, we had a drone go up over all 3 farms, and the hens were locked in the entire time. So they're not getting the access to the outdoors that they should be, and when they are outside, it's very barren. And because these birds are quite scared of the open spaces, they typically don't go outside. And also, hens can be very dominant. So you typically get the few, probably a few hundred in a shed that size, of the very dominant hens that don't allow the other birds to go outside either. So you tend to find you may get, 100 birds outside of a shed of 20,000. So most of the birds never actually get to go outside anyway. And it's one pop hole per 600 hens. So that's the little doors that they get to go outside. And because there's only one per 600, this is where the issue of the dominance comes in, because they tend to guard the pop holes. And this is the cage-free farm that the commitment is currently promoting. This is what we want to promote. Not as an animal justice project, of course, but this is what the commitment wants to promote. And this is a piece of enrichment. So it's basically just a wooden triangle that 4 birds can fit on. And that's what makes it an RSPCA assured farm. That's what makes it so high welfare and so incredible for these hens, apparently. And just another point about enrichment, because that is one of the big focuses of the commitment and these free-range farms. You'll see that there's thousands of hens all just stacked up, just squashed on top of each other, and they don't go on the floor, apart from the dead hens that are squashed on the floor. And these are forms of enrichment that they're given. So we've got a plastic egg tray, a wooden triangle for them to sit on. This one actually had a bale of hay in like a horse net, which they couldn't really reach and hadn't touched because they're not interested in that. And then again, a plastic egg tray hung up. But again, this is what the commitment is asking for. So if we are campaigning for the cage-free commitment, this is exactly what we're campaigning for. We're going to be condoning that. We in general, of course. I'm not going to go into investigation findings too much because they are very bad. You can see it on our socials and on our website. But there was dead bodies every single night in every single farm. It's very, very standard when you've got so many birds inside. Most of them were very featherless. When you typically would think of a battery hen, the one from the cages that were banned, you think of these really poor featherless hens. But they look exactly like that inside of a free-range farm as well. There's really, really no difference. We found birds with so many different injuries, missing legs, twisted necks, egg-bound hens, really swollen hens. And these birds are just being left to suffer because the farmers don't really care. Because most of these birds with missing legs or twisted necks that are suffering are still popping out an egg every day. So they're still making money off them, so they'll just let them suffer until they die on their own accord. So that's the 3 case studies that I wanted to go through. So CCTV, better chicken commitment, and the cage-free commitment. Hopefully you've seen there that if we're pushing for these welfare improvements, the reality is it doesn't really do a lot. These welfare improvements are so minor. For example, swapping the breed of a chicken, or giving them a little bit of enrichment, or putting up CCTV in slaughterhouses. The reality is we've already exposed what that looks like, and other groups have as well. And it's really no better for the animals. And this is something that we've always believed. This is why we've always been abolitionists. This is why I was abolitionist personally before I even joined the organisation. But something which I'm really pleased about is that there's not really any backing to that argument. It's scientifically. We've got our evidence through undercover investigations, but there's a new paper that just came out in the Journal of Environmental Economics and Policy. It was published for review last year, but it got released this year. If you've not heard of it, it's by somebody called Brewers. So it's called Animal Welfare Labelled Meat is Not a Stepping Stone to Animal-Free Diets, Empirical Evidence from a Survey. It's a fantastic paper. I'll go into more details in a moment. But the overall summary of the paper is that animal welfare labelled meat, so that's, RSPCA assured bacon or something like that, or cage-free eggs. It could be counterproductive to veganism in the long term. The reason I've written could is because obviously we can't say for certain. So these are a few of the points from the paper itself. So an intermediate welfarist stepping stone could hinder a person going vegan. It goes into more detail in the paper. Welfare labelled meat will make people reluctant to switch to plant-based foods. Welfare labelled meat reduces how fast plant-based foods will become the social norm. And the issue with that is that many people will not make the switch until it is considered the norm, because we've kind of got that herd mentality. At the bottom here, this is the conclusion from the paper. I don't personally agree with the second half, but I understand where they are coming from. So what we need to do, according to this science paper, is we need to focus on reducing meat consumption by promoting animal-free meat substitutes. So pushing people to go fully vegan, not to choose animal welfare labelled meat. We need to push the people to go vegan. And then what they've suggested is for those people that are really refusing to go vegan, when it is a small percentage, we then introduce the animal welfare labelled meat for the remaining few animals that are farmed. Obviously, we don't want to see that ourselves, but that sounds like a far better idea to me than, you know, what these commitments are pushing. And then I just wanted to talk about this theory as well. So I don't know whether anyone's heard of the Overton window or not. But it's actually a political theory, but it's one that I really like. I've read quite a lot into it, and to me it makes complete sense. So basically, within the Overton window, you can kind of put anything in there relating to politics. Like, so it might be animal welfare legislation that we can put in the centre there. So the Animal Welfare Act, for example. Either side, so on the left, we're going to have our farmers who don't want any improvements and they want to pull us to eating more meat. On the right-hand side, this one is probably Animal Justice Project right at the far end. In the middle, we've probably got our welfarist organisations, and then you've got the public in the middle. So what this means is we're at this far end asking people to go vegan, and the more pressure we have at this far end, the less likely it is the window's going to go to that side. So basically it's like a pulling game. The more pressure we put at this side, we're going to bring this Overton window, which is kind of the norm of society, we're going to pull it towards us more and more, and the more extreme that we are, the closer the window's going to get. Because if we start off here and pull the window, it's going to end up in the middle eventually. Whereas if we start off at the far end and we keep pulling that window, it might end up in the middle with this high welfare assured meat after a good chunk of the population has gone vegan. But if we're not asking them to go fully vegan and pushing these plant-based foods and, you know, to bring animal liberation about, then the window isn't going to shift nowhere near as quick. But yeah, you can look into the Overton window. It's by Joseph Overton, aptly named after himself. So just some summaries here. I know I've gone through a lot, and I think I've probably spoken quite fast because I wanted to really fit in as much as possible. So welfarism aids exploitation, condones killing, and promotes oppression, which hopefully most people agree with me by this point. High welfare in reality really does mean very little. If you do look at our investigations, we have proven time and time again across 18 undercover investigations in less than 5 years that high welfare really means nothing for the animals. CCTV in slaughterhouses is a smokescreen alongside the FSA and OVs. We have a campaign called Scammed, which really goes into a lot of detail about that and how much it really is a smokescreen. And as I say, we've done 4 investigations inside slaughterhouses now. So again, it's not just one bad slaughterhouse, it's across the board. Better Chicken Commitment promotes the killing of slower grown chickens. So if the Better Chicken Commitment is something that you're joining to do activism events for, unfortunately, you are promoting the killing of animals. The 2025 cage-free commitment will not reduce mass suffering, as we've shown free-range farms are just as bad as any other farm. Welfareism opposes veganism and animal rights, as shown by the scientific paper. If you do look into it into more detail, which if anyone's interested, I can send it to you if you come and grab me at the end, because you do have to pay for it. And welfare labelled animal products may hinder veganism in the long term. Thank you. And this is my cat.